I'd written 15 autobiographies for other people with my name had never been on them. Yes. So the very first time I ever saw my name on a book, it felt absolutely, it felt like they'd made a dreadful mistake.
I'm still so early in my career that, absolutely, I'm like bathed in imposter syndrome. I think Tipping Point was sort of the first book where I felt like, okay, I'm sort of okay.
Because we're all capable of murder.
Yes.
In the right circumstances.
Just the right circumstances, yes.
Yeah. And, and I think people are fascinated by that.
Yeah. Well, hello, Michael. It's so lovely to be here with you tonight.
Hello, Dinuka. It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's a very special year this year for you in particular. That's why we have all this massive stack of books.
The stack.
The entire stack, yes. Because it's your 20th anniversary.
20th years. It was on March the 4th, 2004.
Yeah, right.
When The Suspect was first published.
Yeah.
And I love telling people a story because I remember... I'd been a ghostwriter before that. And so I'd written 15 autobiographies for other people with my name had never been on them. Yes. So the very first time I ever saw my name on a book, it felt absolutely, it felt like they'd made a dreadful mistake. And that, and then it got even worse because I was in London. And my wife and I were staying we were put up at the Savoy by our British publishers. It was a huge do. And I went down into a railway station, and on the opposite side of the tracks, they had this enormous sort of poster, and it said, it showed a silhouetted man next to a canal under a, very moody, typical crime writing sort of stuff. And it said, he's had 11 Sunday Times bestsellers and sold 2 million books, but you don't know his name. Meet the man behind the ghost.
Oh, wow.
And that was the way they advertised that first book.
Wow. What a tagline, hey. That you got to pay your marketing team a lot for that
I remember,
line.
I didn't know whether I thought it was cool or cringy, but it was probably very cool.
Very cool. I think you should go the very cool.
Yeah,
yes,
it was like with this latest book, they wonderful Australian publishers liveried up a bus in Sydney.
Yes,
and
saw that.
Along one side it said 20 years of Robotham, and then the other side had all the 18 books.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I remember thinking, unfortunately I was in Perth when that happened, and on the other side of the world on tour, but I remember thinking that was very cool.
Yeah, that's a moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to mark that moment. Yeah. So, so how does it feel sort of having, it's 18 books out in 20 years. And sort of, do you look back and is there sort of one moment that that sticks out more than the others, or maybe one book that sticks out more than the others?
I think that first one, because it did literally change my life.
Yeah.
You've probably been asked this as well. As writers, we sometimes get asked for the book to nominate the book that changed our lives.
Yes.
And it sounds really conceited to say that to nominate one of my own, but that first novel, it literally changed my life because it triggered a bidding war at the London Book Fair, and I went from I suddenly could become a full-time writer. It just changed, got translated into 23 languages, and so I guess that's a special moment. And I think the other moment I remember best is been very fortunate to win 2 Gold Daggers, CWA Gold Daggers, which is sort of the big crime writing award in the world because it's open to all comers. And that and the Edgar Awards in America. Yeah. It's not just a national award; it's an international award. And I remember when I won that, I was on a short list with Stephen King and J.K. Rowling.
Wow.
And Mick Herron, a guy called Mick Herron, who obviously...
that person.
We all know now for Slow Horses and amazing series of novels and the TV series. And I think winning that dagger for the first time was hugely exciting, and it was a big black tie event, and I'll never forget. I told a story about my mother on stage, which I've just mentioned in a podcast that people can listen to about how she reacted to my first novel or didn't react. But I told the story when I collected the award, and as I came off stage, everyone was wanting to congratulate me, and someone grabbed me by the arm and said, "Joe wants to meet you." And I said, "Okay, in a second." And as I kept talking, they got more and more insistent and dragging me through the audience saying, "Joe wants to meet you." And I finally sort of just lost my temper and said, "Who the F is Joe?" Just as the crowd parted and J.K. Rowling was there, and I said, you heard that, didn't you? And she nodded, and I said, I am so sorry. And she just wanted to congratulate me, and I had no idea she'd come. I mean, I just assumed that she hadn't come to the awards because she must probably was tipped off that she hadn't won. But she just wanted to congratulate me and to say that her mother and my mother would have gone on famously, you know. And but that was that night was a real highlight.
Yeah.
Because the second time I won it was during COVID, and it was everything was sort of locked down. It was all done on Zoom, so it didn't have that same excitement.
Yeah. I mean, with that kind of 20-year career, with all the things that have happened in terms of sort of, as you said, sort of being a bestseller kind of internationally, you know, getting onto screen, you know, winning sort of the Daggers and Netties and, you know, all those accolades. Like what does you know, do you feel the kind of the pressure of expectation when you kind of keep coming back to the computer?
I think I've always felt, it sounds completely stupid to talk about imposter syndrome because I know how fortunate I've been. But I've signed every book to my agent with, Dear Mark, we've fooled them again. And this idea that I'm only one book away from someone discovering that I'm a complete fraud and I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I mean, you're right, Dinuka. Obviously, you know, you've got 3 wonderful books out. But, I mean, do you find it gets easier, or do you think each time you start that you're doing it, you're thinking you've got to sort of prove yourself each time?
Oh, I mean, I'm still so early in my career that, yeah, absolutely, I'm like bathed in imposter syndrome. I think Tipping Point was sort of the first book where I felt like, oh, okay, I'm sort of okay, because I felt... with the other 2, I felt like I needed other people to let me or tell me what was working and if it wasn't working and where it wasn't working, and I needed that external validation. Whereas Tipping Point, I felt like I had got to a point in my own craft or having an instinct about the writing that I knew it wasn't working myself. And I would, you know, like I had to work on it until I got it to a stage.
I remember, you know how everyone talks about it, if you felt it with your second novel, that, you know, people talk about second novel syndrome.
Yes.
Or in America, they say sophomore syndrome.
Yeah.
And how... Because, you know, everyone's got one novel in them. Yes. What if I can't do it again? I mean, that's the one book I had, was that first
exactly.
one. Did you feel that with the second one?
Well, that's the thing, because the first one came out through the sort of the whole banjo win, so I won a unpublished manuscript award, and that's how it got published. But that was in September 2020, and then it only came out in February 2022. So I had all that time to write the second one. So I had already submitted the second one before when, you know, the first one. Yeah. So my second book syndrome was in my third book. So
I had this weird theory. By the time I got to the third one, I thought, if I completely cock it up, then they'll say, well, like, he's allowed one bad one. Because he's already got 2 under his belt. You know, it's not as though, so it was almost like the third one. By the time 2 had happened, and the first was really successful, and the second won the first Ned Kelly Awards. And I thought, okay, I can relax now because people think I know what I'm doing, even if I don't feel like I know what I'm doing.
The perception versus what goes on inside your head, I think, is completely different. And I agree that, you know, every time you come to that blank page, like, I mean, I guess that's why I always say, like, you really have to love it. And I think I got this from you, actually. You really have to love it because you keep coming back to that fear. You have to keep coming back to that fear every single time.
I think writing has to start as a passionate hobby, and it's the sort of thing you do it. You do it because you love it. You don't do it because you expect to become rich, because you very rarely do, or you expect to win awards, because you very rarely do. You know, you do it because you just love it. It helps you make sense of the world, and you know, you do it. It's like if they outlawed writing tomorrow, I would do it in my basement while the jackboots marched in the streets above, because I just love writing that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not about anything other than the fact that I just love telling stories.
Yeah.
And if I think if people do that, and then they're good enough and they're lucky enough, because planets do have to line up. The story's got to be the right story at the right time, and you've got to get lucky breaks. Then you can make a career out of it. But it's got to start as a grand passion.
Yes, absolutely. And sort of, I mean, now that sort of 20 years in and writing all those books, do you feel that it is getting easier? I mean, is there a sort of a process that you feel at least, or there's an instinct where you go, okay, even if you've hit a dark patch or a patch where it's not happening, you know, because you've done it before, you can kind of get through it?
I think, look, I don't know if it gets easier. I know my process really well. I think each book is like climbing a mountain, you know, where you can't see the top because I never know how it ends. The only thing that I think, actually, the only thing I will say that I'm better at is that at any point in the story, because I don't, as I say, plot, as long as I can see that there are 4 or 5 ways ahead, that the story could go this way, then if I go a certain direction and it doesn't work, I can pull back and there's other things. The moment that story has only got one possible direction, I get very nervous, because if that's off a cliff, then I am going to have to throw thousands of words away.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easier in the sense that I know to not write myself into a situation where there's only one way the story can go, to just keep my options open all the time. And that means that I shouldn't have those crashing and burning.
Okay.
You know, that's the theory.
So you don't get to a stage where you have to throw away words anymore? Like, I mean, do you?
Oh, I still throw a lot, because I mean, I'll investigate one and write a chapter and think that's not the right way, and that might be a day's work or 2 days' work.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, back in the day, I've thrown 50,000 words away. You know, that's 2/3 of a book for some people.
Yeah. That's
and
a lot.
That is just you weep.
Yes,
when you do things like
that. So for Tipping Point, I think, so that was the first book I wrote to deadline, and that was due sort of on the February, and in October I think I'd written like 20,000-ish words, because I was doing the publicity for Taken at the same time, and I realised, actually this is not the story, and I deleted it and started completely new, and I had to have that conversation with my publisher, and she was lovely about it. But yes, I mean, that's probably the most amount of words that I've thrown out in one hit. I mean, you know, when you're as you go along, who knows how many words you throw out. But but again, I think I don't know if I could have done that when I was first writing. Do you know what I mean? Like as when you're first ever writing, but the fact that I'd done a few, I felt like
I think a lot of people think when they first get published that vindication will mean that it will be easier to write a book a year.
Yeah.
You know, but it's simply, you know, people don't realise that 6 years it took you to write your first novel. That was 6 years of thinking.
Yes.
That was 6 years of investigating certain ideas, and it's a tough gig to actually sit down and write a book under pressure. And I think that's what sets the writers that are going to have long careers out against the people that will love writing but perhaps won't make a consistent career out of it.
Yeah, right. And what sort of, when you are starting brand new with a new project, what comes to you first? Is it kind of characters, or is it sort of that plot? You've got an idea that you really want to explore?
It's the what if moment. It's the what if. It's like with Life or Death, it was, what if a man escaped from prison the day before he was due to be released, based on a newspaper story that I'd read. With Stormchild, which opens with bodies washing ashore on a Lincolnshire beach, a small boat tragedy on the North Sea, which, triggers one of my main characters, Evie, and obviously it flashes back into it. It has some link to her past. I mean, the seed of that was a small boat tragedy in the Mediterranean about 11 years ago, where the one survivor told the authorities that the boat had been deliberately rammed and sunk.
Yeah, right.
And I just sort of held on to that sort of idea. And so it normally begins with a what if moment, and then it's always the characters that bring people back into writing.
Yes.
Back to read certain readers. It's the characters. I mean, I can tell you now, if I asked one of your readers to talk about the book, they would immediately go straight to your characters.
Yeah.
And long after, I mean, I've forgotten the plot. I've got 18 novels here. 18 novels. I've forgotten the plot to most of them.
Yeah.
but I can tell you about the characters in each and every one of them, and that's what brings a reader back.
No, it's so true, because I mean, I do this as well, that 6 months down the line you've forgotten the intricate plot that you've and you're recommending books based on characters. And I mean, talking about Stormchild, which I absolutely loved, by the way, like you've spoken before about Evie being one of your kind of favourite characters that you've created. Can you talk to us about that and why you're so drawn to her?
Evie is this very damaged, mercurial, heartbreakingly funny, broken, self-loathing, self-sabotaging young woman who has got every reason to never trust another human being, given the abuse she suffered. But she discovers in Cyrus Haven a man that she can trust. And Evie has this unique ability to tell when someone's lying. And it's not a superpower, it's a curse, because, you've heard me talk about this before, that, people lie between 10 and 200 times a day. The people in our audience here have lied to each other tonight, He said, gee, you're looking good. That's so interesting. Oh, this whole thing, I bought it on special. I'm 5 minutes away. That's my publicist. I've read the terms and conditions. I only had the one beer. We lie all the time to the people we love, and it's what keeps our families together, our relationships together, our friendships together. If you were brutally honest, let's face it, we would have no friends, and we would have no family that would talk to us. And so, Evie is cursed with this ability, and she knows that three little words like "I love you" or "I miss you" for her have incredible meaning when she knows they're not true. And so she's cursed with this ability. And Cyrus Haven realises that she'll never have a normal life, she'll never have a normal relationship, and that's why he takes it upon himself to see if he can sort of nurture her through life and help her lead a normal life. And so I love Evie. In each of the 4 books in this series, it's been my attempt to explore what it would be like to have her ability. How does she get a job? How does she relate relate to people? And she's funny, and she makes me laugh. And and I think the lovely thing about Stormchild is that she makes you cry as well.
Yes, so, absolutely. I like all your stories, I think, have that idea around sort of, trauma happening to people, and, either they take it out on people outside of themselves, or they take it out on themselves, unless there's intervention in some way. And I feel like all your characters are exploring that in some form or another, and then obviously with crime. Like, what sort of, I guess, you've written 18 books, and you keep writing crime books. Like, what draws you to that?
It's funny, I didn't know when I wrote The Suspect, I didn't know it was a crime novel. It sold on a part manuscript at the London Book Fair on 117 pages, and I didn't know it was a crime novel. And it was only afterwards I remember being asked what I was going to write next, and I had this great idea for a romance. And my publisher said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" And they said, "You're a crime writer." I said, "Since when?" They said, "It's in your contract." Yes, read your contract. But no, I love the genre, and because I love the fact that, as you can explore so many social issues. I mean, your books have tackled, important social issues. You can tell really personal stories, but you can set it against really dramatic backdrops, as in Stormchild is set against that, small boat crisis in the UK. The whole debate around immigration, which obviously the recent British election was dominated by that debate. The American election is going to be dominated by that. The next Australian election will be dominated by immigration.
Yes,
the debate,
and the whole nationalism debate that you go into, which is...
and I wanted to give both sides of that sort of story and put it in there. So I think that's what crime novels allow you to do. They allow you to tell very personal stories and set them against sort of big backgrounds, big backdrops, and look at and shine a light into just the darker sides of the human psyche as well as society. Society's problems in terms of drugs, domestic violence, all those areas.
Yeah, and it is that sort of, you get that opportunity to look at those contemporary issues, the stuff that's just in the news, at the moment. It's kind of in the zeitgeist at the moment. So it is, you get to do that with crime novels, because it is all about when things go wrong, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's
it's all about that conflict, isn't it? I mean, all great storytelling it's about conflict. And there's no greater conflict than when it comes to crime, in terms of someone is dead, someone has to solve that crime, someone is grieving, and often it's entire... there's a wonderful word I remember, a term I remember coming across years ago in the UK, and it was morning sickness. Okay, right. But not in terms of a pregnancy morning sickness, but morning sickness. And it's because it's those crimes that occur, and it's often, like I remember the disappearance and murder of two little, the Solheim girls, the two little girls wearing Manchester United strips that disappeared in England in a little village, and they were murdered by the boyfriend of a school teacher. But in the time they were missing, in the weeks before their bodies were found, they were adopted by an entire country who lived and breathed that story. And when their bodies were discovered, the whole nation mourned. And so those psychologists referred to it as morning sickness. And this idea of that's the impact that crimes can have, and I guess a good crime novel will explore how a crime just ripples through a community, through families, and it affects everyone involved, the investigators, as you know, with your books, the investigators are always impacted by the crimes they investigate,
And you really get to kind of, I guess, with readers, you get to put readers into the shoes of people that they often wouldn't get to meet in real life, some of the most marginalised and kind of vulnerable in society, and you kind of get to kind of peel back those layers to see, well, how did that person get to that, decision point that they did, when often, you see them on the news and you're like, oh, how, you're already judging them, right?
I think they're all interested too. I mean, because we're all capable of murder.
Yes.
In the right circumstances.
Just the right circumstances, yes.
And, and I think people are fascinated by that.
Yeah.
And they're fascinated by the body under the white sheet. It's the reason we drive past accident scenes slowly. And I think, that's why people love crime novels. I think they love the puzzle. Some people love the puzzle. Some people, they do want to put themselves into the shoes of not just the investigator, but the victim and the perpetrator. Yeah. They want to know what goes through someone's head.
Yeah. And the crime novel gives you that perfect mix of the puzzle, the real life issues, the danger, all of that wrapped in, the whodunit. So,
while you're sitting safely in your bed.
That's exactly right. Yes. So on that note, I think we're getting the wrap up, but it's been absolutely lovely to chat to you. Huge congratulations. I hope
Thank you. And you haven't called me a veteran, which I really appreciate.
Oh, okay. Well, I better call you that now.
No,
thank you for being a veteran of the...
don't you dare. You got away with that.
But hopefully there's 20 more years.
You'll be there soon.
More. Yes, I will. Thanks, Michael. All right, thank you.